God is great. God has always been great. God will always be great. Isn't it good news that we don't have to make God great again? God is already great. And we don't have to print it on a red hat to believe it and to know it. God is great. And on this day we gather in the greatness of God. And I am so grateful that on this Sunday of All Saints, this sanctuary is absolutely filled with light. And to me, that light represents all the saints who have gone before us, the angels who are present in this place. The candles on our altar speak to our faith that will stand through all times, Alpha and Omega. What a beautiful day, what a beautiful place, together in hope and in faith. And I can't think of anywhere else I would rather be in the whole world than right here in this place right now. It is absolutely beautiful. The light is filling this air. The angels that we called are here. The great cloud of witnesses is cheering us on. Twig and Larry Uhrig and Judy Gentry, so many who are encouraging us today in this place. This place is filled with light, and that's the truth. And let me speak another truth. We are living in times where it oftentimes seems very, very heavy. And even today, there's a good chance that many of us are bringing some grief and some fear and some hurt into this place. On Saturday nights, I love to get prayed up for Sunday. And yet last Saturday night, I was called into an emergency meeting with the mayor's office regarding the tragedy at the Tree of Life Synagogue. Part of the messaging was that there would be extra police patrols around congregations that are more high risk, Jewish synagogues, Muslim temples, and MCCDC because of our witness to the LGBTQ community. So last week we had extra protection. Sunday mornings I love getting prayed up. And this morning I got a text from the mayor's office saying that MCCDC is receiving extra protection today. I'm grateful to our mayor for ensuring that we can come here knowing that all measures are being taken for our safety. And it saddens me that I'm receiving these kinds of texts, though we need them and they're necessary. We're carrying these needs into this place, this heaviness, this grief. Even on a bright day like this, there was the shooting recently of an employee from So All May Eat who was just waiting at a stoplight and a bullet hit and took his life. And we have some in this congregation who either work for or with some. And I know that those of you impacted are bringing that here today as well. And some have said it's too bad that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I absolutely refuse to accept that. He was just where he was supposed to be. He was just going home. He was in the right place at the right time. The bullet was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some say that the current political climate is adding to the violence and the fear. And I do believe that. There are some who say we need to be a part of the resistance, resisting bigotry and hate speech. I don't quite accept it in that way. I think that the true resistance are those who resist love, those who resist equality, those who resist community and diversity and people of all nations and faiths coming together. That's the true resistance. I don't believe we're called to be a part of the resistance because that's too passive. I believe that instead we are called to be the defiance. We are called to defy hate speech. We are called to defy fear. We are called to defy violence. We are called to defy everything that dehumanizes anyone at any moment. We are called to be people of the defiance, and I believe that is who we are. Sometimes I think we forget that we indeed can be a defiant spiritual force. One of our aspirations is to become a spiritual force, and that's what that is about. It's about standing up against the hate and the fear in our world, standing in the bright light and saying, we are the people of God, and we will not be turned back. Our scriptures today speak, in fact, about defiance. Our scriptures today speak about defying the death culture of our time. One thing that happens when all this violence and fear is going on is that it's easy for us to feel overshadowed by all of that, to be in a sort of fog. A fog of fear is part of that. And one thing I'm doing right now is I'm praying, interceding for Tuesday, because there are some who are afraid to go to the polls. I'm praying that that fear will lift, and I'm praying that there will be no gun violence on Tuesday, that people will be protected. I believe there are things we can do beyond the heaviness and the weight. I believe we could rise up and not let the death culture overshadow us and weigh us down. We do that by standing strong as community and by leaning into all the saints who have gone before us. With all the saints, we can rise above that which weighs us down. That's what MCC actually has been doing since our founding, refusing to be weighed down by the fear and the toxicity around us. Back on October 6, 1968, when the 12 people gathered in that little pink house in West Hollywood, they were not just gathering as community, they were gathering in defiance of all those who said they were not worthy to worship. Many of them had been kicked out of their previous churches, including our founder, the Reverend Elder Troy Perry. Some indeed felt a little fear, but they defied their fear and entered into that place anyway and found strength in community. Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson, our second moderator, has written a book called I Love to Tell the Story. And in it, she talks about the early days of MCC. When the news started getting out, there was opposition to MCC from some on the fundamentalist right. And in fact, in the 70s, there were some bumper stickers that drove through the MCC neighborhoods with a bumper sticker that said, "Kill a queer for Christ." Talk about a fear culture. And yet we refused to be deterred by hate speech on someone's bumper. We continued to believe that we would rise against anything that tried to put us down. We are a resilient, defiant denomination. We are a resilient, defiant church. And nothing will keep us down, including the death culture. Back in the 80s, when HIV and AIDS was at its peak, MCC lost about 40% of its leadership to HIV and AIDS. What do? We developed new leaders, young leaders, people who would rise together and say, we are going to be community, and collectively we believe and we know that God is greater than AIDS. It was true then, and it's true today. We defy anything that tries to make us less than. We defy anything that tries to beat us down. By the saints, with the saints, we rise strong. We are surrounded by that great cloud of witnesses. So let us run with faith the race set before us. I, for one, even though I get discouraged sometimes, will not stay discouraged. Yes, there are those days where I feel like pulling the sheet up over my head and just sleeping through the day and letting that one go. But then I think of the saints that have gone before me. Troy Perry didn't pull the sheets up over his head. Nancy Wilson didn't pull the sheets up over her head. They got up and they stood another day to make a difference in our world. Death can weigh us down, but by faith we rise up every day. The other thing that happens with the death culture is that it distorts our perspective, our way of seeing. Have you noticed this in yourself at times, how it kind of distorts everything? It's happened to me. Sometimes I walk down the street and I find myself out of perspective. I find myself seeing everybody as a potential threat. So I'll look at somebody and say, well, I don't know that person. I've not seen them in this neighborhood before. And then I'll put my cell phone away, or I'll cross the street, and I don't like what's going on in my own heart and mind. And then I realize that's fear talking. Walk proudly and boldly down the street, knowing that every person is not a stranger, but a potential friend I haven't met yet. Death makes us profile in ways that are not true to our character and true to our vision and true to our heart. The news right now, it just distorts our perspective. Sometimes I don't even want to turn on the news. I want to just avoid it. I don't want to hear any more of this bad stuff. Any of you feel that way sometimes? You just don't even want to hear it? I have found that there is a way to change my perspective even regarding the news. What if I saw even the worst news as an opportunity to pray? What if we made watching the news not just a time to grovel in the bad stuff going on, but a time to actually work to consciously intercede prayerfully for what's happening in our world? Since I'm pre-digital, I'm not a digital native, the way I do it is just got a notepad and create a prayer list while the news is going on. If there's someone who's crying or hurting because they've lost a loved one, if I can catch their name in the broadcast, I'll write their name down. I'll write the events down. And then I'll remember that all of this is going to pass at some point. But God is. God is the Alpha and Omega. And then those who've lost someone, as I write their name down, I pray the Psalms. Even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no, for God is our God. And then that becomes a prayer list in a way. Even the stuff that seems so heavy, that distorts us, can become in itself a spiritual practice. The good news of our faith today is that our God invites us to defy death, to defy the cloud and the fog that at times weighs us down. Our God invites us to defy the way that oftentimes death and fear distorts our perspective. Sometimes we get so caught up in the fear that we don't know that God is actually at work, that God is God, that God is greater, that the voice of the Spirit is stronger than the voice of any politician anywhere. The voice of God speaks love and truth, and that's the voice with which we speak. The amazing thing about our God is that God can take even the most tragic and violent death and transform it. I believe in the risen Christ, and Jesus died a violent death, and yet he rose from that death, resurrected and alive, and lives today. If God can transform the death of Jesus, then God can transform the death of anyone, no matter the violence. From Pulse to Pittsburgh, our God is greater than violence and death. Our God transforms us back to life with all the saints, by all the saints, the great cloud of witnesses. Oftentimes we know some of those who have given their life for good in the world. Some of those who are saints. We think of Saint Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We remember him every year. We think of Saint Malcolm X, who also stood for equality and justice and worked so hard. Today I'd like to talk about one of the MCC saints, probably someone you've never heard. Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson writes about him in her book, I Love to Tell the Story. You've probably never heard his name, an MCC pastor named Virgil Scott. He was a quiet one, gentle. Not known for his charisma, he was known for his character and his care and his compassion. He was one of those early MCC pastors in the 80s, serving comfortably in Orange County, California. Became friends with Reverend Elder Troy Perry and Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson. He became aware of the need for an MCC in Stockton, California, of all places. Now, Stockton, California is not a hotbed of progressive political activism. In fact, Stockton, California was a place that was the headquarters for some hate groups, including the Ku Klux Klan. So going to Stockton, California was not an easy job. It was a small church. He didn't have an office. So oftentimes he set up his pastoral counseling sessions or planning sessions at a local coffee shop. He had a big heart, and late one night he got a call from someone he didn't know. But he said, yes, I'll meet with you. I'll meet with you at the coffee shop. And he went there. No one heard from him again for the next 3 or 4 days. The denomination was praying for him, praying that he would be found. Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson was taking a little time when she got a call from Reverend Elder Troy Perry that Pastor Virgil Scott's body had been found in the trunk of his car. Multiple stab wounds. It was clear that it was a hate crime. It was like a huge punch in her stomach. She felt nothing but total grief. She had to step outside just to catch her breath as she thought about her friend, Pastor Virgil Scott. And when she stepped outside and she took this breath, she suddenly had this vision. It was a vision of where God was with Virgil Scott. And she describes it this way. I'd like you to hear this vision in her own words. She says, I could see Virgil getting to heaven, still horribly traumatized by the last frightening, violent minutes of his life. This was not the way to enter paradise, bloody and in terrible pain, alone and scared. The vision continued. I saw the Spirit of God taking time with Virgil. The Spirit of God healing every wound, healing his soul, his body, his mind. God took time to restore Virgil, to erase the trauma, to let it go. I had the strange awareness that this would take about a week. It felt like there needed to be respect and real time, human time, devoted to reversing a human act of rage and violence. I have no real explanation. It was an all-absorbing sensation, and I accepted it as a gift in that moment. Today, I still cling to that vision as an insight I was given, however crude or imperfect, as to how God heals people after death, traumatic or not. Some things cannot be healed in this life, and when death comes so traumatically, it seems so grossly unfair that the last thing someone like Virgil would sense was so horrifying. Maybe it's my own sense of justice that God would take the time to heal Virgil before receiving him into heaven. The joy of entering eternity may require some preparation first. Some things just take time. Fortunately, eternity has all the time that is needed. Where is God in the tragic moments? Already healing, already restoring life. Where was God in the Tree of Life synagogue? Caring, reaching out, loving, even while grieving in the midst of that moment. I believe that death does not have the final word. I believe that we are called to defy death. I believe that we are called to be a defiant congregation. And I love the vision that Reverend Elder Nancy shared, because it's very much like another vision that was shared today. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The former heavens and the former earth had passed away, Death was no more. I saw a new Jerusalem. Yes, Jerusalem. A new Jerusalem, the holy city coming down out of heaven from God. Beautiful as beloveds on their wedding day. As beautiful as a congregation coming together to share the light. I saw a new day, a loud voice calling from the throne. Look, God's tabernacle, God's temple, God's presence, God's synagogue is among the people. God will live with them. They will be God's people, and God will be fully present among them. The Most High will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death, mourning, crying, and pain will be no more, for the old order has fallen. Hatred has fallen. Bigotry has fallen. Fear has fallen. This one who sat on the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new," and added, "Write this, for what I am saying is trustworthy and true." And that one continued, "It is finished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." We have this great faith surrounded by the great cloud of witnesses. Therefore, we run the race as a defiant people, encouraged, knowing that we are the champions of God in this world, with all the saints and by all the saints, Alpha and Omega. Amen and amen.